appreciate that. One of the big issues for young Republicans and really a lot of different people across the spectrum was that at our last RPT, we kind of cut debate short on the platform, which is way too long, and also groups that it was said that groups that disagreed with the platform were not allowed to have a booth, specifically some gay Republican clubs and RAMP, but yet we also had a Tea Party canvas that was completely against our immigration policy at the time. So as chairman, can you, and obviously you don't make these decisions alone, can you help us fight and make sure that all Republicans across the board really do have a voice and at the convention and on the platform?
All right, so let me break that down. Your first point was about the platform.
Yeah.
Let me make sure there's not any confusion when you leave. The committee that I created, that Amy's in charge of, that's going to solicit input, is only talking about the structure of the platform, period. The debate, people talk about the debate, what happened at the convention. Let me tell you, being the chairman of the platform committee is incredibly difficult. We started at noon on Monday. One of the reasons that I've asked the SREC or this committee to look into changing the structure of the platform is because we spent, well, let me tell you, the most valuable commodity in the platform committee is time. There's just never enough time. We spent an hour and a half as a committee trying to figure out the structure of that platform, and we couldn't. And so I figured out that's something that's going to have to take a lot longer. In this case, it will take months probably to figure that out. So what happens is we start at noon, we break into these subcommittees, and then they meet till about 9:30 or 10. They come back on Tuesday, they're taking input, maybe many of you probably were there giving input, and that starts about 8:30 in the morning probably, and goes until about 9:30 or 10. And then Wednesday we started at 8:30 and we went to midnight. Exhausting. Every time the 2 times I've been the state platform committee chairman, after the whole experience is over, I literally got sick. I was exhausted, and my immunity system was weak, and I had to go get antibiotics and recover. So, but it's just, I mean, I knew what I was getting into. It's like, well, that's no surprise because it's what I expected. So what happened on Thursday? Initially, Thursday is, okay, let me tell you the importance. Platform is important to you all, and I want to make sure there's no confusion. We have a temporary platform committee. I'll tell you where those people come from. The SREC, according to RPT rule, the SREC makes a request or recommendation to the state chairman who is bound to appoint the person that is selected by the SREC members. Now, if the SREC members agree on that person, then chairman is required to pick that person for the temporary platform committee. That make sense so far? You may not understand? Because it can be very confusing. If they don't agree, then they submit different names, and the chairman picks between those two. He can't just pick anybody. He has to pick from those two. That's how the temporary committee gets started. And that committee does the lion's share of the work. But the deal is that's a temporary committee. And so the delegates, as you know, we are very much a grassroots party. In fact, we are the most grassroots party that I know of. When I had the opportunity to go to the RNC meeting in January, I happened to sit next to the chairman of another state, and I just was visiting with him at this event. And I said, so how did you become the chairman? Oh, he says, the governor. And I said, oh, really? And I said, well, the national committee man and committee woman, how do they get elected? Or how do they come into that place? And they said, well, the governor picks them. Not every state is a grassroots state. This is a grassroots state. And we all believe that. I, as your chairman, am 190, 100, 1,000% committed to the importance of the grassroots. In fact, what we do on the RNC, we take the message to the other states and say, you ought to be more like Texas. You ought to be a grassroots state because it changes everything. There's an energy and a power that's associated with that you cannot get when the governor's appointing the key people. Anyway, that's the second one. Hold on, let me go back to this question. So what happens is the members of the temporary committee are obviously temporary. Why do they call it temporary? Because the delegations have not yet, what happens at the convention, the beginning, you probably remember this, those of you who attended, first order of business, ultimately, well, first order of official business, is you have to certify the role of the convention. Certify that the delegates there are are properly elected. Now that becomes the official delegates of the convention, right? So then you break into SD conventions, senatorial district caucuses, I should say. I'm setting this vote. Caucuses. Then you will pick the permanent member of the committee. So you get, the grassroots gets to pick the person that they want. Now, most of the time, they pick the person that's been on this committee, the temporary committee, but not always. We had several that didn't get picked this time. Then we meet on Thursday. That is the permanent committee. That committee will decide what that document is that gets submitted to all of you as delegates to vote on. Does that make sense? Initially, the agenda, when we were talking about the agenda before the convention ever got started, before the agenda got published, they had rules starting at 8 o'clock on Thursday. They had platforms starting at 8. And I asked the executive director, and said, I'd like to have our committee start at 7, because we need more time. We need more time. And we wanted to have more time for discussion on the part of the delegates, for testimony and stuff like that. So we got an extra hour. We took, I think, 30 minutes of that and applied it to the 15 that we already had allocated for testimony, made it 45, and then we took the other 30 to allow us to have longer deliberations. All right, that being said, what's the big deal on the cutoff? The standing rules of the committee, we pick a time that says we must adjourn at a time certain. The reason that time is selected is because we have a printing deadline. And anybody in this room go to the 1996 State Convention? All right, you may remember a couple of y'all that were there. Guess what happened? They missed the printing deadline. It was a disaster. On the day of the convention, they had this stuff up on the overhead, and people were saying, where's the platform, the proposed platform? Where are the rules? There weren't any, because they missed the printing deadline. You only have to experience it. I mean, I was a delegate, and I saw what a mess that was, so you can imagine how that was imprinted on my mind as the chairman of the platform. We will not miss that deadline. So if people are watching the deliberations, they're wondering, why is Tom Mechler pushing this committee so hard? Because of the printing deadline. Get it done, get it done, get it done. We had to get it done. And so anyway, to answer that question. So the second thing was about the booth, right? Folks, the officials committee, was that the second question? Did I answer your first one?
Honestly, actually, my first question was about the floor debate, not the...
Oh, the floor debate.
Yeah, that'd be, because one person got this group got what they wanted and cut off everything. I thought you handled the committee fine. I was there for a week.
That part was free.
Yeah, I was actually just talking about the floor debate being cut off because one group got what they wanted.
Yeah, they called the question, and then all of a sudden we're done.
But yeah.
Well, let me tell you, I've been to every state convention since '96. To the best of my knowledge and remembrance, every time we had a convention, somebody called the question. Otherwise, it goes on forever. The thing that concerned me, and I made a comment in Houston, and I said something like, I thought the last day turned into be a meltdown, and like, oh my gosh, why did you say that? Well, there was 197 amendments proposed to that platform. There's only 3 of them, I think, that got considered. So what happened to the other 194? Now, some of them were all, several that related to immigration. The process kind of broke down, it seemed to me, and it was unfortunate. And then we ended up spending like an hour and a half, I don't know how long we spent, hour and a half doing the voting. So I've asked, Amy probably told you all this, I've asked that committee to also look at a different way to vote on the platform. Maybe as an idea, maybe there ought to be a line item, maybe y'all as delegates should have a line item veto right. The governor has that for the budget. So maybe you get a line item veto on the platform, whatever that threshold is, if it's 50% or 60%, whatever the SREC decides it to be. And anything that doesn't make that threshold, it's not going to be in the platform. That would be maybe a better way to do it. I don't know. There's other ways to consider, but that was, somebody made a suggestion like that after that convention, and I thought that was a pretty good idea. Anyway, about the booth, the officials committee will decide what the booth policy is. We haven't figured that out. We've had one meeting to discuss it. Official committee meetings are executive sessions. It's the only executive sessions that we have in our party at this point. But we talk a lot about strategy and all that. So if you have thoughts or concerns about the booth policy going into the 2016 convention, this would be very timely for you to provide your input to your SREC members and ask them to provide input to the official committee members. So I think somebody over here had a question. Was it you in the back? Go ahead, the gentleman behind it. Yeah, it's you. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not really a question, kind of food for thought, two quick things. Number one,
Can you speak a little bit
platform,
louder?
oh, sorry, the platform is great in putting all of our values and stuff on the platform, and what the candidates are gonna be running on is great for people that know about the platform, that know that that document actually exists. But I looked at the Texas Democrats website, and if you go on their website, it is completely different than the website for the Republican Party of Texas. The Republican Party of Texas still had stuff from last year. The Texas Democrats, they have their values like right up front. They have different areas where you can click on it to where it says specifically, this is our values. And they have some values that kind of lines up with what I think our values should be. Or they put in there, oh, we support the troops and all that, even though I was in the military and I know about getting our pay cut or getting what you call it, a smaller raise whenever there's a Democrat in office as opposed to a Republican. But I just want you guys to look at the Texas Democrats website and then look at our website and see if you could find what our values are on ours compared to what their values are on theirs. And if you can't, then that's a problem, because people that don't know about the platform don't know to look for the platform. They don't know what Republican values are. And then another thing is, when you're reaching out to minorities, the word conservative has a historical bad connotation to minorities. I mean, it is what it is, because when the Republican Party first came out, it was liberal. The conservatives were the Confederates. And even though it's not the same thing, conservative principles are different depending on what you believe in. So if you're traditionally, like if you're a Catholic, you're a different kind of conservative than if you are a Baptist. If you are a constitutionalist, you may be a different kind of conservative than a religious person. And if you're in Afghanistan, conservative means something completely different than if you're in America. So when you go to minorities, you need to have this stuff in mind, that some minorities are afraid that the conservative party, they don't realize that the Republican Party helped free the slaves, and the Republican Party helped with the civil rights movement and all that. They don't understand that. All they hear is conservative, and conservative also try to keep that stuff in mind. It's the same thing with the war on women. Conservatives didn't want women going out and working. So our conservative values are different than the conservative values of the people in the past. And so that's something that we need to get out there too, as opposed to saying, oh, they're liberals, they're this or they're that, because the liberals now try to play on the strengths that we had in the past.
Well, I think,
Messaging problems.
well, yeah, I mean, I think your comments are right on point. We've got some pretty big issues with respect to our brand image. The Democrats are defining our brand image, we're not defining it. We're aware we have a problem. I'll have staff look at, they'll take your suggestion, look at what the competition's doing compared to what we're doing. The platform, we already have plans to do a facelift on that and to change that and to rework on that. We need help, you know that. We have a technology committee that's helping us look into a bunch of things with the technology. Am I done? One last question. I think she actually has a minute. Go ahead.
I am curious because I think in terms of minorities and whatnot, we all agree. One of the things that is bothering me a lot, and I'm not gonna give the name of the county away because, I just don't wanna point out people like that. But, my parents are extremely wealthy. Our seniors, retired, active community, super wealthy county, or not county, but area. And every time I go out there, they're complaining about our generation. And I just hear one complaint after another, and it's all white people, and it's not minorities. And so that's when it comes to our party. And I even went to a Republican women's event, and the speaker was like, oh, those white people, you know, and complaining. And so that's where I'm like, absolutely, let's engage minorities. Let's engage, you know, these topics that we're afraid to. But within our party, the reality is, it's white people that have the infighting, and that's where, and it's older generations versus younger generations, and the thing that matters there. And I am over it, and I had those conversations with them. I stood up in the Republicans' women meeting and said, I am a board member of a Young Republican group, and I promise you, we are not all slackers, we're not all leeches on the government, we're not all this, we're not all that. We do stand up and we care about the Republican Party. And so that's something that I think is an issue. And so my question to you is, how are you going to, people at your age and older, and saying, look, we gotta quit this, we gotta quit saying these young people don't wanna work, they don't wanna do this, they don't wanna do that, because they do.
But, you know, I think that it's part of human nature to be somewhat distrustful of people who are not like us. That's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
They do that because of race, do it because of age, do it because of gender sometimes, or do it because of religious beliefs. And so one of the things to address your comment, the first is to say that a lot of what I said to you today, it's maybe changed a little bit in terms of how I delivered it to you, but I'm saying the same thing all over the state. And I'm most certainly saying what I said to you about, when I asked you to raise your hand, I am saying that when I was running for state chairman, I spoke with a group, the Republican Women's Group, and I asked this question to them. I said, how many people in this room are under the age of 40? Nobody raised their hand. And I looked at the group and I said, do you see a problem here? Because I think as the state chairman, as I begin to challenge their thinking, you know, I certainly can't go to them and say, well, you have no right to believe that. They have a right to believe it. You have a right to believe what you believe. But it's not helpful, and it's not conducive and productive. So part of that issue is what they're receiving as information. But I believe as a state chairman, saying boldly and frequently to every group I speak to about the next generation, about you are the future of this party, you are the ones that protect our legacy, and you are our ticket to retirement. And I keep telling people that, it begins to register, and they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And if I come back to the same group a year from now and it's still the same makeup, I'll say, well, they didn't receive that message very well. But if they begin to have young people and look for chances to do that, I don't want the next generation to have to relearn all the challenges and the lessons I learned in my generation. It would be so much better for y'all, for your generation, for us as the older generation, to say, this is what we've learned, this is what I'm not saying you have to take it and say, okay, that's what we have to do. You don't have to do that, but you at least have the benefit of our generation's experience as you go to live your experiences. And you can say, yeah, I think someone said something about that kind of worked out that way once. So we might want to be a little careful in that area. It would have helped me a lot when I was in my 20s, late 20s and early 30s, when I first got involved in the party, to have had somebody tell me that. I had people say things and do things to me when I was young also, and I'm like, holy cow, I didn't deserve that. Well, it was a bias on their part, that's why they said it. So I think I'm out of question time, and thank you all again so much for having me, and I appreciate you.